Lynn, dressed in a simple gray hoodie, jeans, and sneakers, walked confidently down the upscale streets of Beverly Hills. She looked nothing like the typical buyer who would normally be seen in this exclusive neighborhood, where luxury cars and designer outfits were the norm. The towering mansions with their sleek, modern designs stood as symbols of wealth and sophistication. As she strolled past the opulent homes, Lynn's demeanor remained calm, a stark contrast to the suspicious and curious glances she received from the few residents and visitors in the area. She paused in front of one particularly striking property, a multi-million-dollar mansion with a glass facade that gave a clear view of the lavish interior. Its pristine white marble floors and high ceilings gave off an air of elegance, yet Lynn's focus was more on the details than the superficial beauty. As she approached the front door, her expression remained neutral, not revealing her true intentions. The real estate agent, Emily, dressed in a perfectly fitted beige blazer and high heels, eyed Lynn skeptically, sizing her up based on her casual attire. With a polite but distant smile, Emily asked, "Good morning, are you here for the showing?" Her tone carried an air of condescension, a slight tilt in her eyebrow suggesting that she didn't quite believe Lynn was in the right place. Lynn's response was simple and direct, "Yes, I'm interested in the property." Emily hesitated for a moment, her gaze still lingering on Lynn's modest clothing. She clearly expected someone more up to par with the lavish lifestyle the house represented. But Lynn, unfazed by the judgment, kept her calm composure. Little did Emily know, the woman she was dismissing in her mind was about to prove her assumptions terribly wrong. Emily, the real estate agent, was a woman who prided herself on her ability to read people. She had spent years working in the luxury real estate market, where appearances meant everything. She had learned to spot the serious buyers from the look of them, the ones who drove high-end cars, wore expensive suits, and had assistants by their side. So when Lynn, dressed casually in a hoodie and sneakers, showed up at the front door of the multi-million-dollar property, Emily's initial reaction was one of surprise and subtle disdain. In the world Emily worked in, first impressions were paramount. The designer brands and perfectly curated appearances of the wealthy clients she dealt with had shaped her view of what success and sophistication looked like. Lynn, with her simple, understated attire, didn't fit the mold. Emily immediately assumed that Lynn was either lost or, at best, looking for something far below the price range of the home they were about to tour. Her smile, though polite, was laced with skepticism. She could already tell that Lynn wouldn't be able to afford the luxury of this property, or so she thought. When Emily asked Lynn if she was interested in the property, Lynn's response was matter-of-fact and unwavering, "Yes, I'm interested." Emily's surprise was fleeting, but still evident. As she walked Lynn through the house, she couldn't help but notice how much more serious Lynn seemed compared to other clients she'd dealt with. Most wealthy buyers would be distracted by the opulence of the mansion, but Lynn's questions were pointed and precise. She didn't waste time admiring the decor or gushing over the price tags of the designer finishes. Instead, she asked about the construction materials, the foundation, and the long-term durability of the property. Emily, clearly unprepared for such inquiries, hesitated, unsure how to respond to someone who wasn't focusing on the superficial luxury of the home. The more Emily interacted with Lynn, the more she realized that Lynn was different from the stereotypical buyers she usually worked with. She wasn't impressed by aesthetics alone, and she wasn't intimidated by price tags or status symbols. She was focused on the real value of the property, on whether it was a smart investment. Emily's confidence in her judgment began to waver, but instead of acknowledging her misjudgment, she tried to steer the conversation in a more comfortable direction, suggesting that Lynn might be more interested in something more accessible. However, Lynn's calm, collected responses only highlighted how out of touch Emily was with this potential client, and how much she had underestimated her. Lynn, unruffled by Emily's condescending tone and dismissive attitude, continued to move through the luxurious mansion with the calm demeanor of someone who had seen it all. As she walked through the spacious living areas, the sleek marble floors, the expansive glass walls offering panoramic views of Los Angeles, and the carefully chosen furniture all seemed to fade into the background. Lynn wasn't interested in superficial beauty, her eyes were trained on the finer details, the quality of the materials, and the long-term value of the property. She wasn't in Beverly Hills to be dazzled by grandeur, she was here to make a calculated decision, and Emily was beginning to see that Lynn wasn't just any buyer, she was someone who understood the intricacies of real estate on a level that few in this world could match. As they moved through the open-concept kitchen, Lynn's attention was focused on the sleek black quartz countertops. She casually ran her fingers over the surface, her eyes scanning the design with precision. "Are these finishes imported?" she asked in a calm, neutral tone. Emily was caught off guard. Most buyers wouldn't have cared about the sourcing of the materials, they were more interested in the look, the luxury. But Lynn was different. Emily quickly recovered and confirmed that the finishes were indeed carefully selected to ensure quality and elegance, but Lynn's expression remained neutral. She wasn't satisfied with just surface-level answers. She was focused on the longevity and functionality of the investment. Lynn's inquiries were direct and specific, and they made Emily increasingly uncomfortable. "What about the foundation?" Lynn asked, her voice calm yet firm. She was clearly knowledgeable about real estate, and Emily found herself scrambling to keep up. Emily's hesitation was palpable. She had expected Lynn to admire the house, gush about its design, and express awe at its luxurious features. Instead, Lynn was probing into structural details, things that most high-end buyers didn't care about. Emily fumbled for an answer, offering to provide the information later, but Lynn's follow-up question caught her off guard even more. "In a neighborhood like this, with unstable soil, how is the foundation reinforced to avoid future structural issues?" The question hung in the air, and Emily's discomfort deepened. She had spent years dealing with affluent clients who cared about aesthetics, status, and the showy nature of luxury homes. They didn't ask questions about the integrity of the foundation, they didn't care about the long-term stability of a property. To them, it was all about making a statement, about buying into the lifestyle. But Lynn wasn't playing that game. She was thinking long-term. She wasn't just looking for a mansion, she was looking for an asset that would hold its value and protect her investment over time. As Emily tried to regain her footing, Lynn continued her methodical inspection of the property, acting as if she were already imagining herself living in the space. It was clear that Lynn wasn't just another buyer passing through, she was someone with a deep understanding of real estate and investments, someone who could see beyond the glossy surface. But Emily, stubborn in her preconceived judgments, still couldn't fully grasp who she was dealing with. To her, Lynn was just another, out-of-place, visitor, someone who didn't fit the mold of the typical luxury buyer. What Emily failed to see was that Lynn wasn't just looking at the house as a status symbol, she was assessing it as a real, tangible investment, one that required not just emotional appeal, but intellectual consideration as well. As Emily continued to guide Lynn through the opulent home, the tension in the air became palpable. Emily, still holding on to her judgment, tried to regain control of the situation. She desperately wanted to steer the conversation back to what she considered normal for a luxury property tour. Her mind raced, thinking of ways to divert Lynn's questions and assumptions. She had seen this scenario countless times, a client who looked like they didn't belong, only to be quickly swept up in the allure of high-end living. But Lynn wasn't falling for that. Instead, she kept a composed and calm exterior, her demeanor betraying none of the frustration she might have felt. She wasn't interested in the typical spiel, she wasn't about to be impressed by the flashy promises of marble countertops or a rooftop terrace with a view of the city. "Tell me more about the house," Lynn asked, her tone even but tinged with a quiet authority. Emily, who had been trying to assert herself as the expert, took a deep breath, mentally reminding herself to regain composure. She began listing the property's features with practiced ease. This property has 6 bedrooms, each with a private balcony and walk-in closet. The main living room boasts double-height ceilings and seamless access to the outdoor space, which includes an infinity pool with panoramic views of Los Angeles. There's also a private cinema with state-of-the-art technology and a home automation system for full control of lighting, temperature, and security. Lynn nodded, listening attentively, but her expression remained unreadable. It was clear that Emily's sales pitch wasn't having the desired effect. Most buyers would have been enthralled by the grandeur of the home, fascinated by the amenities and luxuries. But Lynn wasn't asking about the aesthetics, she was already thinking beyond them. Her next question was another curveball for Emily. What about the foundation? Lynn asked, her voice steady but assertive. In a neighborhood like this, where the soil can be unstable, how is the construction reinforced to avoid any future issues? For a moment, Emily's mind went blank. This wasn't the kind of question she was used to dealing with. Most buyers didn't care about something as technical as the foundation. They cared about how impressive the view was, how many bedrooms the house had, and whether or not the kitchen had the latest appliances. But Lynn was different. She was focused on practicality and long-term value, something that Emily hadn't expected. Instead of answering the question directly, Emily deflected, offering a vague response about getting the details later, but Lynn wasn't satisfied with that. She had made it clear that she was here to make an informed decision, not to be placated by generic answers. As the tour continued, Lynn's questions became increasingly specific, and Emily's unease deepened. Every answer she gave seemed to be met with more skepticism from Lynn. Emily found herself becoming defensive, trying to justify the lavish features of the house, yet each time Lynn pointed out the lack of practicality or questioned the underlying value of the property, Emily's confidence cracked just a little more. It was as if Lynn could see through the superficial facade of luxury and instead focused on what truly mattered, whether the house was a wise investment. In that moment, Emily's mind began to shift. She started to realize that she had misjudged Lynn. She wasn't some lost soul wandering into a high-end property, she was a serious, knowledgeable buyer, one who wasn't interested in being swept up in the spectacle of wealth. She cared about the longevity of her investment, the practicality of the home, and the reliability of the materials. Lynn wasn't the type of person to buy a mansion just to show it off, she was interested in more than appearances, she was focused on sustainability, value, and the future. But instead of acknowledging her mistake, Emily tried to double down. She offered suggestions for more accessible options, subtly implying that perhaps Lynn didn't belong in such an expensive property. It was a subtle jab, one that reflected how deeply rooted Emily's biases. As the tour continued, Emily's discomfort grew, and Lynn's composed demeanor seemed to magnify every misstep the real estate agent made. Lynn had never been one to boast about her accomplishments or her status, but she had lived through enough to recognize when she was being underestimated. She could see the subtle shifts in Emily's body language, the tightness in her shoulders, the way her smile began to falter, the defensiveness in her tone. These were all signs that Emily, despite her polished appearance and years of experience, had never truly taken the time to understand her client. She had written Lynn off based on her clothes, her casual demeanor, and the simple fact that she didn't fit the stereotypical image of a high-end buyer. But Lynn was here for something more than just appearances. She was here to make a smart investment, to find a property that would stand the test of time, and she wasn't going to let anyone distract her from that goal. The real tipping point came when Lynn turned the tables on Emily, her calm voice cutting through the tension in the air. "I have a plan for this place," Lynn said, her eyes locking with Emily's for a moment. It was a simple statement, but the weight of it was undeniable. Emily blinked, surprised by the shift in tone, but Lynn didn't elaborate any further. Instead, she continued to walk through the house, her gaze sharp, as if she were already envisioning the future within these walls. She had seen countless properties before, and this one was no different. It was beautiful, but it needed to be more than just a pretty face. Lynn's questions, focused on the foundation, structural integrity, and long-term sustainability of the house, made it clear that she was looking at this property through a different lens. Despite Lynn's insistence on discussing the practicalities, Emily remained stuck in her initial assumptions, struggling to mask her growing discomfort. She couldn't fathom that someone with such an unassuming presence might be a serious buyer. In the world of luxury real estate, everything was about perception, and Lynn's lack of a designer wardrobe, her simple appearance, seemed out of place in the high-end world of Beverly Hills. But Emily's failure to grasp this simple fact would soon come back to haunt her. She assumed that anyone who didn't look the part couldn't possibly be playing the same game, but Lynn was a skilled player, and she had every intention of proving that to Emily. As the conversation unfolded, Lynn's patience with Emily's assumptions began to wear thin. Emily had clearly misjudged her, and it became increasingly difficult for her to keep up the pretense of professionalism. Lynn had been patient, had listened to Emily's explanations, but now the facade was slipping. Emily suggested, almost dismissively, that perhaps Lynn might be more suited for a property in a different price range, implying that the $25 million mansion was far beyond her means. Lynn, who had heard these kinds of assumptions before, remained unfazed, yet her response was pointed. "Interesting," she said, a hint of a smile playing at the corners of her mouth. "But I think you're underestimating me." There it was, the tipping point. Lynn's calm confidence was now an undeniable force. She wasn't here to be treated as a second-class citizen based on her clothes or her quiet nature. She was here to make a deal, and Emily had just crossed a line. The shift in the dynamic was immediate and profound. Emily, flustered, had no choice but to keep trying to recover. She attempted to steer the conversation back to the house, listing its features, but every word felt hollow, every description ringing empty. Lynn wasn't buying it. She had already seen through Emily's thinly veiled judgment. But the most telling moment came when Lynn, still calm, said, "I think I'll need a bit more information before moving forward, but thank you for the conversation, Emily." It was a quiet dismissal, but it was unmistakably clear, Lynn was no longer interested in entertaining Emily's superficial approach to selling the property. The real estate agent was no longer in control, and Lynn, by simply asserting her quiet authority, had taken the reins. It was in that moment that the unexpected happened. Keanu Reeves arrived. The sleek sound of a luxury car pulling into the driveway interrupted the tension in the air. Emily's heart skipped a beat as she watched the tall, effortlessly cool figure of Keanu emerge from the car. His presence immediately changed the energy of the entire scene. Keanu, as casual as ever, walked toward the house with an easy, relaxed confidence that immediately commanded attention. He wasn't wearing a tailored suit or driving a car that screamed wealth, he was just himself. When he reached Lynn, he smiled, the familiarity between the two instantly evident. "Hope I'm not late," he said, his voice warm and calm. Emily's jaw dropped when she realized who it was. Keanu Reeves. The famous actor, the icon of Hollywood. But more importantly, he wasn't here for the house, he was here for Lynn. The agent's mind raced, trying to piece together the situation. Why was he here? Why was he walking toward Lynn like they were old friends? The realization struck like a freight train, Lynn wasn't just some casual visitor. She wasn't a pretender. She wasn't someone to be dismissed based on appearances. Lynn was a serious buyer, and her connection to Keanu only solidified that fact. Emily, embarrassed and caught off guard, could do nothing but watch as the situation slipped from her grasp. Lynn, with a knowing smile, turned to Emily and said, "I think we're ready to continue the tour, don't you think?" The power dynamic had shifted entirely. Emily, trying to salvage what little dignity she had left, forced a smile and nodded. But the truth was clear, she had just made the biggest mistake of her career. As the awkward tension continued to build, Lynn could sense that Emily was struggling to regain control of the situation. The agent, who had prided herself on her ability to close high-stakes deals with ease, was now facing a challenge that she wasn't prepared for. Lynn, dressed in simple attire and carrying herself with quiet confidence, had thrown Emily off balance. The agent had assumed that Lynn was just another tourist, someone with no real understanding of the high-end real estate market, but that assumption had proven to be gravely mistaken. Lynn wasn't just any buyer, she was an experienced investor with a sharp eye for value and potential. But Emily's preconceived notions, rooted in her years of catering to superficial appearances, had blinded her to the truth. As they continued the tour, the contrast between Lynn and Emily grew ever more apparent. Lynn, who had been analyzing every detail of the property with precision, was no longer just asking questions about the home's design and features. She had moved beyond the obvious and was focused on the long-term viability of the investment. Her inquiries about the structural integrity, the foundation, and the durability of materials were not typical of the luxury buyers that Emily was used to dealing with. Most of her clients were far more concerned with the aesthetics, the impressive price tags, and the prestige of owning such a grand home. But Lynn wasn't interested in the surface-level appeal of the property. She cared about its real value, its potential to appreciate over time, and its ability to withstand the tests of time and nature. The questions Lynn was asking were thoughtful, logical, and incisive, and Emily could feel the pressure mounting with each passing moment. The agent, sensing that she was on the verge of losing control, tried to redirect the conversation back to the house. She listed the amenities, trying to sell Lynn on the luxurious features, the infinity pool, the private cinema, the expansive walk-in closets. But Lynn wasn't buying it. She wasn't impressed by the bling that the property offered. Instead, she continued to focus on the core issues. Was this house built to last? Was it a sound investment? Would it be able to withstand potential seismic activity in a city known for its earthquakes? These were questions that went far beyond the typical concerns of most buyers, who would have been more interested in talking about the view or the neighborhood. But for Lynn, those surface-level details were secondary to the bigger picture. She wasn't going to spend millions of dollars on a property just because it looked good in the moment, she was thinking decades down the line. And that's when the final blow came. Emily, frustrated and unable to regain her footing, suggested that Lynn might be more interested in something more accessible, a veiled insult that implied Lynn wasn't qualified to purchase a home of this magnitude. The implication was clear, Lynn didn't fit the profile of a typical luxury buyer. She wasn't wearing designer clothes or driving an expensive car, and she didn't have a personal assistant by her side. In Emily's mind, that meant Lynn didn't belong in this world, or at least, she wasn't qualified to purchase a home like this. Emily's arrogance was on full display, and she hadn't even realized it. Lynn, however, wasn't fazed. She had dealt with this kind of dismissive attitude before. She had walked into countless rooms where people assumed she was out of her depth simply because she didn't fit their narrow view of what a successful person looked like. But Lynn wasn't about to let Emily's ignorance and prejudice define her. With a calm smile, she looked the agent in the eye and said, "Interesting, but I think you're underestimating me." The words hung in the air, and Emily felt a sudden flush of embarrassment. It was as if Lynn had just peeled back the curtain on her assumptions and exposed them for what they were, shallow and misguided. The tension between them reached a boiling point, but Lynn remained unfazed. She didn't need to prove herself to Emily. She didn't need to impress her with flashy displays of wealth or status. She knew exactly what she wanted, and she wasn't going to let anyone, especially a real estate agent who couldn't look past appearances, derail her from that goal. Emily, on the other hand, was struggling to maintain her professionalism, but her discomfort was becoming more and more evident. She couldn't understand why Lynn wasn't reacting the way she expected. She had done everything right, she had shown her the property, listed all the high-end features, and maintained her polished demeanor. But none of that seemed to matter to Lynn, and Emily was beginning to realize why. Then, just as the conversation seemed to reach an impasse, a sleek black Porsche 911 Turbo S pulled up in front of the mansion. The sound of the engine echoed through the quiet street, and both Lynn and Emily turned to look. The door opened, and a tall figure emerged, dressed casually in a dark jacket, jeans, and sunglasses. His presence was magnetic, effortless, and cool. The moment he removed his sunglasses, Emily's jaw dropped in recognition. It was none other than Keanu Reeves. The actor, a living legend, was walking toward them, and Emily was frozen in disbelief. Keanu approached Lynn with a relaxed smile and greeted her as though they were old friends. "Hope I'm not late," he said. Lynn responded with a warm smile, her demeanor still as calm and composed as ever. Emily stood there, dumbfounded, trying to piece together what was happening. Why was Keanu Reeves here? Why was he walking directly toward Lynn? And more importantly, why was he treating her like an equal? The realization hit Emily with full force: Lynn was no ordinary buyer. She wasn't just some random person with no understanding of the luxury real estate market. Lynn was a serious investor, someone with connections and influence, someone who was more than capable of buying this property. And the fact that she was now standing with Keanu Reeves only served to underline the truth that Emily had failed to see all along. As the two exchanged pleasantries, Emily stood there, feeling more and more out of place. She had misjudged Lynn in every possible way, and now she was paying the price. She had underestimated not only Lynn's financial capacity but her intelligence, her insight, and her ability to make decisions that went far beyond the superficial. When Lynn finally turned to Emily and said, "I think we're ready to continue the tour," it was clear that the power dynamic had shifted irreparably. Lynn was now in control, and Emily was left scrambling to keep up. The lesson had been delivered, and Emily had no choice but to face the consequences of her mistake. The story offers a valuable lesson about the dangers of judging people based on appearances and the importance of professionalism and respect in business. Emily, the real estate agent, initially underestimated Lynn because of her casual attire and assumed she didn't belong in the luxury market. This superficial judgment clouded Emily's ability to see Lynn as a serious, knowledgeable buyer. However, Lynn's quiet confidence and sharp understanding of what truly matters in an investment revealed that success isn't about how one looks or dresses, it's about intelligence, capability, and making informed decisions. The key takeaway here is that biases can cloud judgment and prevent individuals from recognizing true potential. It's crucial to treat every client with respect and approach business with an open mind, understanding that appearances don't always reflect a person's worth or knowledge. Lynn's ability to remain composed and professional in the face of disrespect shows the importance of not letting others' assumptions define you. Ultimately, the story teaches us that integrity, respect, and a focus on what really matters, whether in real estate or any other industry, lead to success and mutual respect.